And we are set. So I'd like to welcome everyone out to the website launch from the African Center for the Study of the United States. I am Asad El-Malik. I won't take up too much of your time. I'm going to pass this over to the interim director of the African Center for the Study of the United States, Dr. Bob Wakisa.
All right. No, thanks, Asad, and thanks, colleagues, for making time. We are glad that you could join us on this occasion when we are finally unveiling our website, which has been in the making for quite a couple of months. In fact, it's not to suggest that we have not had a website. We have had a website from the very beginning. In fact, our website is pretty much part of the WITS University website. And so it has been in place from the beginning when we started off in March 2018. However, we've been over about a year, been working in behind the scenes to see if we could have this website as not just any other website, but actually a portal and therefore a repository of all the projects that we have undertaken, so that it's a go-to place for researchers who are looking for information, who are looking for journals or other materials such as newspaper article, op-eds, so opinion and editorial commentaries, or webinars, who are looking for that kind of information that they might be helpful in terms of their citing or referring to such works that we've undertaken over the last 5 years. We also thought that a consolidated website with all the works that we have undertaken for the last 5 years will be helpful to colleagues who are journalists, be they broadcast or digital media journalists, be they in broadcast media, be they here in the US or in South Africa or elsewhere in the continent, and indeed elsewhere in the world, who might want to just get perspectives on Africa-US relations, who might want to have quotable quotes. I hope some of those materials quotable quotes indeed, but also who want to get contact people or people that they can actually post questions to help them, provide some perspectives on any aspect of Africa-US relations. A quick further background here is that we have actually been working with lots of media houses. And we want to acknowledge that some of the material that you'll see on the website comes from our partnership with organizations such as Mail and Guardian in South Africa, such as Foreign Policy Research Institute in the US, which is a think tank based in Pennsylvania. We've had a very healthy and ongoing partnership with Good Governance Africa through the African Governance Papers, but even more importantly, the Africa in Fact. In fact, we did publish a book on Africa-US policy positions in 2021. And we've had a good relationship with News 24, with nearly all the media, broadcast media, television stations, and so forth. So we really must acknowledge that some of the knowledge that you will see on the website is in collaboration with these media entities. And it's not as if we are abandoning these colleagues, these media houses. We shall continue partnering, but we thought we'll just nudge the information together. Before handing over to Professor Kajagala, I just wanted to mention that you will find that this information sits within specific projects. So the website has the pages that speak to particular. When we started off in 2018, we were very top heavy on matters public diplomacy and soft power. In fact, at the time, former President Barack Obama was visiting South Africa to attend the 100 years of birthday of Mandela, and we did a couple of webinars, a couple of virtual meetings around that, but also produced a series of think pieces. In fact, with another partner, Institute for Global Dialogue. And so that's where our story of publication began. We have not by any means abandoned public diplomacy and soft power as both a concept and a practice. It continues featuring in our work in one way or another. But beginning 2020, we thought that the field of public diplomacy had grown to a point where we had to rethink it in certain ways. And therefore, we started working on what we call digital diplomacy, which in a nutshell, or if we want to say definition 101, is basically that we use digital platforms to undertake diplomacy, including public diplomacy, but other forms of diplomacy like negotiations and so forth. And this was indeed triggered by the closure that we all experienced in 2020 with the pandemic. But we did fairly well. I think colleagues here might be like, yeah, there is room for self-congratulation on this, because not only did we produce think tanks, in fact, with another media organization called Africa Portal. Unfortunately, Africa Portal is now moribund. Africa Portal was an entity of the South African Institute of International Affairs. So we did a couple of think pieces on digital diplomacy and diaspora, digital diplomacy and negotiations, digital diplomacy during the pandemic itself. And we worked very closely with DIRCO, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. So not only did we produce these various articles that you'll find on the website on various aspects of digital diplomacy, but we also ended up doing a special journal issue, which was published the following year, 2021, with the SAJA, South African Journal of International Affairs. So this material is also there, about 10 peer-reviewed, blind-reviewed journal articles. And I think this has taught us one lesson, which we are very keen to share with colleagues, that sometimes we start projects as just a virtual meeting. Then this virtual meeting goes to writing opinion and commentary articles or thought leadership articles, and that then goes on into full-fledged journal articles. That, in fact, was the case with the 2020 US elections, which was also a big area of our research and publication in our politics domain, led by Prof. Kadiagala. I will speak about that perhaps. But essentially, the election 2020 pitting Joe Biden and Trump, Donald Trump, was a very dramatic election in many respects. And we did actually well over 20 webinars around that. I lose count, but I know that beginning July 2020, we were doing weekly webinars with colleagues here in the US and around the continent. And eventually, that, in addition to the other work that we're doing on research on US-Africa diplomacy, political relations, even issues to do with diaspora, democracy and human rights, we ended up producing a book, an edited volume, with Good Governance Africa, which is out there. I suppose we are reaching a point where you might think of a new edition for that book. Along the way, we also started a project called Africa US Cities, internationalization of cities and IR, city diplomacy. And we actually also produced a number of articles, particularly yet with another partner called allafrica.com. And my colleague, Tluma, is here. He might talk a bit about that. But ultimately, we are in the process of converting some of the articles to do with how cities relate, how cities are avenues for relations between Africa and the US, how cities are sites for contestation, and how cities have become, in fact, diplomatic actors. All those unrelated issues are going to be, developed into a special journal issue, which we are working on. Another project around which we produce some knowledge that you'll see on the website is the US Business in Africa Awards project, which is a project that was set up to recognize and honor US businesses, companies, firms that are making a contribution to African economies. They might be making these contributions in terms of employment opportunities, technology and skills transfer, or direct contributions, in fact, to the budgets of these companies. They might also be making contributions in terms of ESG, environmental, social, and governance promotion, and so forth. So we've produced a number of articles around that. We've also done a couple of webinars and virtual meetings that you'll find on the website. I think another key project that we've undertaken is the Diaspora Project. And again, we produced a number of thought leadership articles in partnership with Michigan State University and the Howard University Center for African Studies, and these two institutions remain our partners, in fact. This was also published by Good Governance Africa in either 2020 or 2021. I'm blanking out on that, but I suspect it is 2021. And actually my colleague Asad here is running that project. He might actually be able to provide some more information. So in a nutshell, this is the information. You'll find well over 100 articles in various forms and shapes. You are welcome to critique some of them. We do not want to pose as if we are not it all, where you think there's missing information, gaps, or mischaracterization in whichever form. We welcome you. This is a debate platform. We also welcome you to contribute articles and be part of this, what we consider a knowledge community. But I'll stop there so that I give my colleagues an opportunity to take it over from there. Over to you, Asad.
Thank you so much, Bob. And you did mention the center published, or you edited a book on the Biden administration's policy. I don't know if everyone can see this, but this is the book from the center, edited by Dr. Rukiza. Prof, over to you.
Thank you very much, Asad, and thank you, Bob, for the good summary of what we've been doing, and also a very good summary of the history of the website. So I want to welcome everybody to the launch of the revamped, it's actually a revamped website. And I want to thank my team that has been very critical in putting in a lot of energies, a lot of resources to make sure that we have, in fact, a website that works. The problems we've had in the past have been alluded to, but I think we put in a lot of effort, and then we got very good people on the team to work on the website, to dedicate their energies to it. So I really want to thank everybody who's been involved in it, and appreciate the fact that this has been a collective effort to make sure that the center image is out there. And I don't need to emphasize that websites are really the interface between the center and the general public. But the website is also critical because it showcases what we've been working on, the research that we've been doing since we were established 5 years ago. And Bob has summarized some of those big areas that we've been engaged in research and knowledge production at the center. And so it's going to be an important moment for us to have a website that finally functions, and a website that in fact allows us to describe who we are, what we've been doing, and how we've been doing it. So I think that is the overall objective of revamping, launching the revamped website. In fact, to tell the world that we've been in business for the last 5 years, and we've been doing some interesting work on US-Africa relations. I thought I would just spend a few minutes to tell you about the center itself and its objectives and some of the programs, although Bob has already hinted on some of those programs that we have in fact produced knowledge about. The center was established in 2018 with several objectives. The first objective being, we learn through comparison. Knowledge is produced by comparative work, and therefore the center seeks to understand the US as a way, in fact, to improve our understanding of ourselves as Africans. So that's an important objective that we had in mind. And the motto of the center is understanding Africa by understanding the United States. And that is a comparative dimension that we've been inspired by from the very beginning, that we learn about each other by trying to understand each other, and therefore gaining more knowledge about the US from an African perspective is an important area that WITS has invested in. The second objective was that given the historical relations between the US and Africa, it was important opportunity to establish a center that systematically focuses on the study of US-Africa relations in all their broader dimensions, from culture, from politics, from philosophy. So it spans a wide array of disciplines, because we believe that the US is such a huge country and its engagement in Africa has been very historical, and therefore we need to cast a bigger comparative, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary lens in understanding the United States. And some of the programs that Bob has mentioned speak to that issue of interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity. The third objective is that as the center develops, it is going to be the site for the training of the next generation of Africans who are knowledgeable and who are interested about the United States. There is a lot of African knowledge in the US, but there is very limited US knowledge in Africa. And therefore, the objective is that if the center becomes a site for the training of the next generation of African scholars and African policymakers who are knowledgeable about the United States, that will fill a very important gap in the knowledge about the US, in the understanding of the complexities of the US as a society, as a nation, but also as a global actor. Thirdly, even though the center is located at the University of the Witwatersrand here in South Africa, the other objective of the center, in fact, is to bring in African institutions that are also studying the United States. So it was very important from the outset that this center not be a South African center for the study of the United States, but an Africa center for the study of the US. And that is why we've been very aggressively reaching out to African institutions, African academics, working on the United States. And we've done through what Bob was describing as the partnerships that we've launched with several African institutions and US institutions too. How have we translated these big visions in reality? I think the first thing I want to say about the translation of our vision into reality is that we are a research institution. We are based at a university that aspires to be one of the leading universities in the world. In fact, last year, we celebrated our 100th anniversary of the foundation of WITS. Part of that vision, vision around becoming a leading global university is to say, how do we invest in research and how do we produce research that is not only confined to South Africa, but is also global knowledge about US-Africa relations. So that has been, in fact, one of our biggest objectives, to broaden the horizon as we expand the knowledge around Africa-US relations. The second way of translating our vision into reality is we've sought to have a policy-relevant component to the center. A lot of what Bob was describing, the webinars that we've had, the seminars that we've had, and all these other public engagements have actually sought to bring in policymakers into the discussion of how do we inform discussions about the US-Africa relations, particularly since it is important to policymakers, particularly African policymakers, who struggle always to understand the complexity of the United States. The objective, therefore, has been to begin to have a policy component that produces knowledge that is not only publishable in journals, but also produces knowledge that is publishable in vehicles that are reachable to the rest of the public. So some of the publications we've done have been very much clearly policy oriented. And I think we've done very well there in disseminating the knowledge about what we produce. And the website is going to further, in fact, contribute to that dissemination of the kinds of knowledge we have produced around policy. So it's important that we do both academic work, but it's also important that we have a policy relevance to what we do. Thirdly, we started very modestly by launching some online courses. I think we did this around 2020, particularly during the COVID crisis. We were able to begin the training of diplomats in digital diplomacy, the area that Bob has mentioned. But what we thought we would do in the long run is to begin to build on that network of the network of teaching and outreach to begin to do short courses around the US-Africa relations. And there are many good courses that we could launch. We haven't really put the program in its full dimensions yet, but we did a very excellent job of beginning to reach out to diplomats through the digital media and so on. So the training part will actually grow as we begin, in fact, to build what we are calling American Studies program. We want the center at some point to begin having full-fledged courses on the United States. And what a better place to do it than to do it here. We could not do all these things without the critical element of partners and partnerships. What I want to do here is essentially acknowledge the funders who in fact set us up and got us going. And we are very lucky that when we started, we had the confidence of Mr. Mulwesi Mbeki, who also serves on the advisory board of Axos, who was one of the few South African private individuals to see the importance of a center of this nature. And he thought it's important that we establish a space for the study of the US in Johannesburg at Wits University. So Mulwesi came on board very quickly to help us get started. And then subsequently, we got funding from the US Embassy in Pretoria, which was with us for about 2 years, again, gave us seed funding to get going. Thirdly, we got funding from the Ford Foundation office here in Johannesburg. And the inspiration for that funding was, you have to reach out to the rest of Africa. We need to bring in postdoctoral students working on US-Africa relations, but they need to come from all African institutions. So Ford Foundation was very, very critical to launching us into the broader continent. And I think we do appreciate that funding because it gave us, in fact, some of the first postdoctoral fellows we had at the center were funded through the Ford Foundation. The other institution that I want to mention, which has been very important since day one, is the Hewlett Foundation of California. And Hewlett Foundation has been funding us from the time we started until now. And we really do appreciate the effort put in by by the Hewlett Foundation in recognizing that Africa, in fact, needs to understand the US, because the US is important for Africa, just as Africa is important for the US. But they did that by really putting money where the ideas were. And so we do appreciate that contribution. Finally, I also want to thank the Stanley Bergman Foundation. Stanley Bergman is on the advisory board of the WITS Fund in New York, and the Bergmans came on board because not only that they are South Africans, but also that they live in New York, and they have some resources to put to the table, and we do appreciate that. The second component of partners are some of the ones that Bob has already mentioned, particularly academic institutions. We've done a very good job of reaching out to American institutions that have been helping us, in fact, to project the image of the significance of studying the US. So from George Washington University to Michigan State, to the University of Southern California, all these institutions have been with us from day one. And in fact, when we launch an event of this nature, we are launching also with the objective of saying, we've been in business, and therefore we need more partners to come on board, because what we are doing is essentially very critical. Finally, I also just want to mention a little bit about the programs, although Bob did speak to some of them. Our programs that we focused on, first of all, was the public diplomacy program, which Bob was running from the outset. But the public diplomacy has now expanded into other areas, as Bob explained, into digital diplomacy, into a diaspora program, because we wanted to reach out to the diaspora, because they are a critical partner to our institution. The other component of diplomacy was therefore the role of cities as international actors. And it has also grown into a program of its own. And we've had conferences, we've had meetings, we've done some publications on it. So it is an important program that we have showcased as an important area of Africa and US engagement. And roles of cities are becoming even critical with the new challenges such as climate change, that we need to begin to understand how US cities are engaging African cities. So those are very important programs that we have under the wider rubric of public diplomacy. Our other program has been the cultural project. We have a cultural project here that focuses on US-African cultural relations. You know, from the Harlem Renaissance to all aspects of, we have scholars working on jazz, and we have scholars working on literature. And this is also a very interesting interface between the US and Africa. And what we did in 2021 was to publish a book on the cultures of populism through the initiative of the individuals who ran that project. Mal Williams and Adam Levine have been running the culture program, and we want to build it up also as we go, because it's important to understand the cultural dimensions of US-Africa relationships. And then, as Bob also mentioned, we have a program on US-Africa political relations. And what it does is that it focuses on all the big events around elections, around Congress, around US-Africa foreign policies. And that is why the book that Assad was mentioning was a framework for how the Biden administration has been engaging with Africa. We wrote this book just at the moment that Biden was coming into power. So if you read it, you'll see that we are beginning, in fact, to begin to make some prescription on US-Africa relations. And we are suggesting that the Biden administration can, in fact, tap into some of these ideas that we put in our book. So, and as was mentioned earlier, we are also trying to come up with a new volume that also is going to look at the bigger question, where is the US-Africa relations now? particularly as the US goes into the elections again next year. Time flies. So, but these are things that we need to keep our heads up on. So it's an important program that we launched. We also have done research and public engagement on a very important area called US-China digital competition in Africa. We have produced some works there, and they're going to be on the website, literally looking at what does it mean for Africa to have the US and China competing around these technologies, particularly the phones and all this. So it's important that we focus on it, and we've done some good work on that. The other program that Bob mentioned is the US Business Awards in Africa. We had a big event last year where we were awarding prizes to US companies that have contributed to corporate social responsibility. And this is also an area that is important because it helps us to link up with the WITS Business School, but the other business schools in the US and also in Africa, in recognition of the contribution of these companies to African economic development. And finally, as I mentioned, we are gradually planning to set up an American Studies program within the center, which will then do more training of US students who want to understand, African students who want to understand the US, and we'll invite, in fact, scholars from the US to participate in this important component of our program. So in brief, that's what we've been able to do over the last 5 years. And I'm excited that with the website now running, anybody who is anywhere in the world can simply go there and, in fact, celebrate with us the work we've been doing over the last 5 years. But you can also make critical comments about what we're doing, or you can suggest other areas on the larger US-Africa umbrella where we can actually put more effort. So I'd like to thank you again for being with us, and hand it over back to Assad to show us what the website looks like. Assad, thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to everyone who are that's leaving questions on the YouTube chat, we definitely see you. We will get to your questions momentarily, but I'm going to take a moment to share my screen so that we can kind of so you guys can see what the website looks like. I won't go through every page of the website, but just to get an understanding of some of the things that you can find on the website. So I believe I'm screen sharing now. Yes. So the website's title is Africa-US-Forum.Africa. That's Africa-US-Forum.Africa. We can go here to, well, as you can see, the front page of the website gives an update. Recently, we had a book launch. There is also information on climate change for a program that we, with one of our partners that Bob has established. Other parts of the website here that I really think are pretty neat. So if you click here, from Africa to the United States, which kind of encapsulates the idea of the center altogether. But as Prof mentioned, we have our partners. So one of the good things is that we partnered with Pivot to Africa to have very updated weekly updates on stories and happenings related to Africa and the United States. And you can click on either one of these links, and it's various links here, broken down by region, and it'll each lead you to a story that is germane to the topic of US-Africa relations. also here, I wanted to briefly click on to our projects page, and as it loads, you see some of the work we have created around some of the projects that we have. And as the Biden administration may come to a close or may be extended, we'll be creating more work eventually around that policy position. So again, the link, I'll stop sharing now. The link to the website is in the chat. Please, I put in the YouTube chat as well as the Zoom chat. Please take a moment today and share the website, peruse the website, and as Prof mentioned, feel free to leave a critical note. If you disagree with some of the conclusions made by some of the scholars, please feel free to reach out to the center with a retort. I think we would really love that, and we would love to offer a multiplicity of thoughts and ideas on the website as it relates to U.S.-Africa relations. So I won't continue to ramble. There are some questions that I think we want to get to, at least one or two of them, and I'll direct this to Prof. One of the comments mentions that there's an African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of Pretoria. Are these two separate institutions? Are these, how does the partnership between us and the African Center of Pretoria work?
Yeah. So let me put it this way. We were the first center to be established in 2018. And then the University of Pretoria created their center 3 years later. And the theme of our two programs are almost the same. But our understanding is that because the US is a huge country, because the issues to be covered are equally huge, there is no competition between a center at Wits and a center in Pretoria. In fact, one of the things we did when we got started was to begin talking to African institutions about setting up similar centers. And we had advanced discussions with the University of Nairobi, with the University of Ghana, with the University of Dar es Salaam, and we're going to expand the discussion because the knowledge is important. The more institutions we have, the better. And so the issue around competition literally is not there, because I think we feel that we are advancing the same objective of promoting understanding of the United States. So even if we had 7 or 10 in South Africa, all the better, because this is the kind of dynamic that we want to create around the US. And as I said, if we are thinking of training the next generation, then the more institutions we have doing that, the better. And then we can meet at some point, collaborate in some areas, and work together where we can. So that's really the spirit of the expansion of these universities, these institutions. In fact, there is a center for the study of the US in the Maghreb in Morocco. And that was actually one of the centers that we reached out to when we started. But they are focused largely on the US engagement with the Maghreb countries. So they don't deal with sub-Saharan Africa. So what I'm saying is I think we need more of these institutions.
Absolutely. Dr. Mkiza, Bob, I want to direct this question to you as it relates to how does, is Bob still on?
I think so.
Oh, I see him now. How does Africa, in terms of policy, leverage its policy position with the United States?
No, I think that's a good question. And it's the more reason why we have done work on an African policy position towards the US. As some colleagues who are here might remember, we grappled with this issue quite a major, in a big way. First of all, we couldn't even ourselves agree on whether we are talking of a policy framework or a policy position or just merely proposals. The other issue, because it's understood that a policy has to be promulgated or announced by a formal institution, and we are a research center which can contribute good ideas, but the people to make it happen at the implementation level have to be formal institutions, either country, region, or continent. And in fact, that was the other big issue, where we also, some of those ideas of conflict are in that book, where we said, should the policy be done at the Africa Union level or at the RECs, regional economic communities like SADC and EEC or ECOWAS, or individual countries should do the policies towards the US themselves. And I think I'm taking advantage of being the only one discussing this without my other colleagues with whom we had major debates being here, to say, for me, I thought it was okay to have a policy at all levels. The AU can have a position towards the US. Regional economic communities looking at their own interests can also have their own policy positions. And a country such as South Africa or Central African Republic and so forth can also have their policy positions. But having said all that, I think we do recognize that indeed African countries do not have formal policies towards the US, neither do they have policies towards the EU or China. And it's now recognized that the US has a policy towards the entire continent. That for some people is quite interesting. The EU, China, and so forth, and that we should be looking to put together policies, because if you do not have a policy, then you are not guided by much. You are on autopilot, as it were. So I think that will be my response. Thanks. Yeah.
This is a very broad question that came in. Why study the United States? And it's a question that goes at the root of the idea of the very center of the African Center for the Study of the U.S. Why study the U.S.?
I think one reason is that the U.S. has studied us a lot, and therefore we need to reciprocate by then casting an eye at the U.S. as Africans. I'm not being facetious here. I'm just saying that it's important for Africa to understand the U.S. because the U.S. is a global player, and Africa is equally a global player. So they need to understand, to appreciate with each other's interests. They need to appreciate each other's roles and so on. But the second reason I gave when I was presenting was the historical linkages between Africa and the US are deeper and of long-standing vintage. And therefore, why don't we have a center, therefore, that begins to bring all that knowledge together? And I mean, it's a lot of history, and there are a lot of issues there, including slavery and all these bigger issues. But we are trying to capture them in the center to appreciate the fact that the US has been Africa is an important player in the US economy, in US politics, and vice versa. So that is why we need, in fact, to put more focus on understanding the US. But there is also a reason that, other powers like China, like the EU, or countries like France or Germany, they're putting a lot of efforts in understanding Africa. But Africa has not put into any effort in understanding these countries. Yet we have one of the largest group of Africans who are educated in the US. In fact, from the 50s, the African migration to the US, the more recent one, stems from around that time. And so it is important that we collect knowledge about the patterns of migration, not just between Africa and the US, but also Africa and the rest of the global diaspora. That's why we have a diaspora program that, in fact, wants to expand knowledge, wants to expand understanding of the role of the diaspora in African development, historically and in more contemporary times. There was a part of our webinars that we had about 2 years ago where we are looking at the role of new Africans in the US. We are calling them the new diaspora. Although we were also had discussions about not making a clear distinction between the new and the old. I think we should just stick to the concept of diaspora without making a distinction between the new and the old. But what we're trying to do is to look at the new patterns of migration into the US by not just academics, entrepreneurs. We have scholars there with African scholars working in the US. We need to bring them home to tell us what they are doing in the US and all these issues. But we also need to send our African colleagues and students to understand the US so that they can come back here and help in the dissemination of this knowledge, these ideas about the United States in the world. So I think just in short, in brief, that's what our vision was, that we need to understand the US in order to understand ourselves. And that is the vision that I put across. It's an old vision from de Tocqueville, Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America, where he says, you cannot understand other society, you cannot understand yourself unless you understand how others live. And so we are using that as a platform to say, it's important that we have reciprocal understandings of each other, Africa and the United States.
Absolutely. Bob, what other institutions besides academic institutions is the center? Obviously the center is an academic institution, but what other US centers, what other institutions is the center engaging or partnering with?
No, I think we have a dense network of partners in the US. I think we have covered pretty much many of the university-based ones. It's pretty much working with a number of historically Black colleges and universities, starting with a big one called Howard, the Center for African Studies at Howard, for example, but also universities such as Morgan State University in Baltimore, such as North Carolina Central University, such as Spelman, and many others. So that's one kind of grouping of institutions that we are working with, historically Black colleges and universities. And then we do have African Studies centers in these universities, American universities. I think Prof did mention a number of them, but just to repeat, we have a relation with the Institute of African Studies at George Washington University and African Studies Center at Georgetown, Center for African Studies at Howard University, the University of Southern California. Now, there are two entities that we work closely with, that Center on Public Diplomacy and the New Africa US Initiative at USC, University of Southern California. And then, of course, we have a relation with the Michigan State University and University of Michigan. Both have African Studies centers. And so, I mean, we have a relationship with the University of California. One of the professors in the African Studies department is, in fact, on our board. And so I can go on and on with these institutions. But on the other hand, we also have relations with US think tanks. And specifically, we have a relationship with, the more recent one is the Atlantic Council, but we have had a long-running relationship with Center for Strategic and International Studies. We have a relationship with an organization called Charter Cities International. And we've had relationships with more think tank in the business domain, that's Corporate Council on Africa and US Chamber of Commerce. We have a relationship with an organization that is allied to American Jewish Council. It's called the African Center, based in New York. We have a relationship with a university-based think tank called William Davidson Institute in Ann Arbor as well. And then we have, and I think there's quite a few others that I can't think of quickly now, but it's quite an extensive network. But I'll characterize them as HBCUs, African Studies Centers at universities, and think tanks. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you both for responding to those questions. I know we have more questions in the chat. However, I wanted to give our colleagues at the center an opportunity to introduce themselves. Maybe we can start with Kluma.
Okay, thanks. Afternoon, colleagues. My name is Shumalu Vokhalane. I'm currently working as project coordinator on the Africa-US Cities project here at the African Center for the Study of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Kluma. Evaristo?
Okay, cool. Good day, viewers and our guests here. My name is Dr. Evaristo Mugocha. I'm currently the coordinator of US Business Africa Awards. More of what we do is basically on the website. We are basically in the process of preparing for our US Business Award to happen next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I know our other two colleagues were on, but they may have had to leave, Kelly, as well as Jean. So I just want to make sure we said their name and thank them for all of the work that they do at the center. We are drawing near to the hour. It's 7 minutes to the hour. I'll turn to Prof and Bob. Are you guys willing to take one or two more questions?
Yeah.
We have about 40 people watching on YouTube. So some of the questions we have right now are around diaspora engagement. So I think I may be the individual, but I'll allow Bob or Prof to respond. How does the center plan on really engaging the diaspora? I know Bob mentioned HBCUs and African studies programs. Are there any other ways that the center looks to engage the diaspora?
Bob?
Okay, no, sure. I think we've engaged with diaspora quite a bit. As mentioned earlier, diaspora provided a very easy entry point. As Assad calls it, the relations, it's a distant cousins. So our connections are natural almost. And so when we started off, we have had good relations with colleagues and institutions and think tanks working in diaspora. In fact, as Prof will tell you, as early as 2018, 2019, we're already working with an organization, which is still our partner, called African Renaissance and Diaspora Network, which we continue to work with. And of course, we have produced some knowledge on diaspora engagement in the form of those think pieces. I think they need revision. They were produced just shortly after the unfortunate murder of Floyd in May, and we had a series of webinars in partnership with US colleagues at the time. And I suppose it is about time we went back to the drawing board to figure out what we can do more. I know Assad is working on a project as we speak. There's been a great interest in diaspora business engagement. And this we've discussed in the form of including diaspora-specific projects in the US Business in Africa Awards, because we do think that if we just say US Business in Africa Awards for large businesses, we are likely to miss out entrepreneurships where the majority of African Americans who are migrating back to the continent are located. People who are just setting up restaurants or music stores or engaged in one form of business or the other. In fact, it's not only quote unquote historical diaspora, but returnees, people who are born on the continent, have lived in the US and are returning. And I think there are lots of those that are involved. They have come here, acquired some knowledge, acquired some skills, also build up resources, and we look to work with them. We have also, in some form or shape, and this is something we need to work on further, worked with the Red Cross as well as the International Organization for Migration. These are contacts we established, but I think as we talk now, this discussion is good because then we are reminded that perhaps we need to resuscitate, revisit those contacts and develop them. Every year, we always do the Black History Month events, including this year. So next year for certain, we're going to work on that. At the same time, we have now started celebrating the anniversaries of the African Union. This year, we did it in partnership with Howard University. And of course, there are many opportunities. First of all, just organizing visits for African Americans who want to return to the continent, either for short stays or want to figure out if they can relocate for keeps. There are many students in HBCUs who also want to come for summer schools or for semester abroad, or even for a year abroad, or in fact want to do their studies and undertake their studies in the US. There's the whole area of diaspora as the sixth pillar, or is it the sixth region of the African Union, and their colleagues, including those colleagues at Delaware State University, Professor Aharon, and so forth, that are working on those. In the recent past, we've been in great conversation with some of the long-running diaspora organizations, such as Constituency for Africa, which is run by Mel Foote, and a couple of organizations. So I think, in a nutshell, there's so much opportunity that we can mine there. Some of it we are working on, but I suppose we are just scratching the surface. And we welcome colleagues who are interested in mining these opportunities in real terms, so that we take this forward. Thank you.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Prof. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Access, the African Center for the Study of the United States. We've drawn near to the hour. We only have 2 minutes left. We want to thank everyone that participated in the YouTube and the chat, who watched. We have 36 people watching now on YouTube. We have one question in the chat. Let's see. What do think tanks outside of colleges and universities do? What are their goals? What are the requirements for collaboration? I think that's an interesting question. I think the ultimate goal of think tanks is to, specifically in the US, is policy change, to influence policy. So the research matters, the data matters, as I always say, data matters. So the think tanks come up with the ideas that can, at least from their vantage points and positions, to influence policy. And I think as the African Center for the Study of the United States, we definitely want to influence policy, but as an academic research institution, our goal is ultimately the research. So thank you guys so much for participating in this call, and I'm going to end the Zoom now. Please check out the website, follow us on social media. Gene would be upset if I didn't say this. Let me see. So please let me give you our social media contacts. Is on YouTube is Access Vits. On Instagram, it's @Vits Access. And then on Facebook, it's the African Center for the Study of the United States. Thank you all for participating. You guys have